Hello, everyone.
Hello. Hope you hope you're all doing well. I see Dom and Mr. Rez and Bear. Welcome, friends.
Already got some pals hanging out with us there. But we are here to do, more or less I guess a follow up stream. I think what did you call the six,
Yeah,
like the a half episode,
61.5. Yeah. Well, because we were talking about Vader last streamcast, the comic series, and then like the most like big thing to talk about, we weren't able to spend a lot of time on it. So I just figured we could just pick up where we left off. Hey, Sin, welcome.
so we are circling back today to talk volume 4 of Charles Soule Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith. Again, not to be confused with any number of other Darth
Other
Vader or
comics
Lord of the Sith properties. But
that may or may not exist in Star Wars.
Volume 4, Fortress Vader. Um,
Yes.
I will start off by saying I think this was my favorite of the 4 arcs,
Oh yeah,
um, which
for sure.
surprised me given that I saw a lot of people, like, as these issues were coming out on Twitter, that had thoughts and opinions, as tends to
Yeah.
do. I also saw some Goodreads. I post everything I read on Goodreads. There were a
Mm.
couple of disgruntled readers there as well, but I really liked this a lot. Like, this is probably one of my favorite Star Wars comics volume of this.
Yeah, and I feel the same way, and I'm surprised just because I had pretty much read this comic on Twitter the way
Right.
people were sharing screenshots. So I was like, okay, I pretty much must know everything that happened in it. So like, how am I gonna? And then, as it turns out, there was a whole lot more going on than even got posted. Um, but this was great, and I love it because I love anything that has like crazy force implications.
Right.
And this certainly has some things that we can talk about, which is why we figured we'd come back and spend the whole arc on it. I mean, one of the biggest things is the character of Moment. Welcome, Sarge. Moment, however you would say it. But he was one of the first kind of new Sith that we've gotten a new. I don't know that he was the first new one. I don't know that I can say that with confidence. But he's pretty early on, just because we haven't gotten a lot of prequel trilogy information yet. We've
Right.
gotten more sense with some of the stuff that came out this year, but all of those came out after this comic. So this comic was kind of like the first to give us some glimpses. And we see Moment and Moment's master both. Again, Moment. I'm sorry. I say everything in Star Wars wrong, so it's only appropriate that I would mispronounce this character as well.
Everything has two pronunciations. And
If
Solo,
you,
we'll tell you that.
exactly. If you
On
ask
his
Dave
trip to
Filoni,
Moraband.
right? Dave Filoni has. I've heard him say in an interview before that he intentionally had people in Clone Wars say things different ways just to go with it. But what I liked about Mammon was he made me think of a character from the Knight Errant series by John Jackson Miller, which is both a comic series and a book. That's very underrated, and by underrated I mean I'm not sure a lot of people read it, but it was really good. And in it, there's these two Sith Lord siblings, and one of them is the Sith Lord of Death, and like he's death and destruction, and the other one is a Sith Lord of creation, like Mammon. Very kind of different though. Like Mammon is a freaky artist. He actually made me. He reminded me more of Sander Cohen from the Bioshock games, which will mean nothing to most of the people in the chat, but that's
That
okay.
reference resonates with me very strong.
Bear, who's in the chat, will 100% get what I'm talking about, and that's okay. um, but I like this idea of dark side creator. So where Momin was an artist, the guy in Knight Errant, he was kind of doing this revisionist history to be the god that created the Star Wars universe. But it's still it kind of took me back to that, and I love anything that's kind of like just crazy force nuttiness. And so I just like this idea of this madman who is destroying everything, and then, but he's really like this artist and this creator. What? Oh, all right. Well, sorry about that, Dale.
I
Uh,
don't know. Both of our microphones are like peaking to the point that
yeah,
OBS tells problem.
Yeah, I always sound overmodulated when I watch the stream back, so I don't know what's going on there. Hello, Darkrai, welcome. Good to see you as well.
Yeah, I really like the character of I guess I read it as Moman. Um
Moment.
too, but I was
I'll go
thinking
with it.
of is it MoMA that was the weird internet thing with the like the statue with the
Oh,
crazy eyes?
oh, that
Like
freaky thing.
yeah,
Oh my,
that's
yeah.
that's why I pronounced it that way. Um
Oh, that thing was terrible.
but um
Now I just
just
have that image in my head.
just to settle whatever fears you might have, I don't have that pulled up ready to fly. Um, if I had planned ahead of time, maybe. But, I mean, in my planning ahead of time, that's what I do. But I really liked Moment too. I think one of my favorite characters or things about the character, which one I love that we get sort of the plant of the mask
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
earlier in the comic, back in the Jedi Temple, in the
Yes.
archives, when we was that volume 2. um it
Yeah, because
was
it's the one with Jocasta.
right. But I love that um he's like able to inhabit different bodies. And
Hmm.
like there's a scene where he's going through all the different iterations of the castle,
Yeah,
and Vader's like trying them
that
out
was
and they're
almost
not working.
comical.
And so like it was funny. And so like Vader like kills this like the body every time, and they're like, all right,
Right.
on to number 7 or whatever it was.
That was so freaky. Also, hello, Stuart. Yeah, and I think that's part of what this comic. I feel like, especially Fortress Vader, but I feel like it was in the other comics to some degree. But like, there's such strange, good comedic timing in what was going on there.
Right.
It's like it is this creepy thing. Like it's this force ghost that's sort of type thing that's living in this mask and is like possessing people. But it's also funny because Vader is just like murdering random people. Hey, Gina, welcome. It's good to see you.
Yeah, and Darkrai's right. You know, the mask even took over a lava fleet at one point.
Yeah,
Um,
I saw
which
that too. I liked that.
I really liked the lava fleas in this too, by the way,
Hmm.
because like I liked how they talked about, oh, was it like the good lava and the bad lava?
Bad lava,
Yeah.
yeah, and the Mustafarians and what they were doing.
And
Um,
I love because we had just read Myths and Fables too.
mhm.
I could almost see
Yeah,
them as having like myths and fables about what was going on here with
yeah.
the creation of the fortress. I mean, and also then there's the tie-in to the Vader's Castle comics too. I love that this is kind of
Yeah,
bridging some gaps.
yeah, and I like you said, I like seeing different people in Star Wars that have this idea of the Force outside of the Jedi and the Sith, and it was a good way to kind of put a light side kind of conflict for Vader without
Right.
having to bring in the Jedi, right? So that they were these people that were doing things, and then you can see Darth Vader's extreme power because of what he's doing against what the Mustafarians are bringing.
Right.
So that was really solid.
Well, and it's a type of power, even in terms of what the fortress is doing and opening the
Hmm.
door, stuff like this, but also in terms of like the way that Moman is like bound to the mask.
Yeah,
Like it's all like force powers that, especially in legend or in canon, we've like
right.
this type of stuff. Like we know that some Jedi have like a sense of psychometry, touch item
Hmm.
and kind of feel its history. That's a different thing than like your body being bound to, or your soul being bound to
Right.
item. I mean, we've seen things like that in different instances. Not seen it.
Well, and that's part of why I really wanted to make sure I had this series read before the Rise of Skywalker, just because I have no idea if it's going to connect. Um, but one of the theories for how Palpatine is going to come back is that he could come back as a ghost, and
Right.
in current Star Wars canon, it's really only lightsiders. It's only people who have kind of fully connected with the living force that have been able to come back as force ghosts.
Right.
Where like in Legends, it seemed like everybody like became one with the Force and faded away. And if you play like Knights of the Old Republic, there's Sith Force ghosts everywhere, and so the rules are kind of different in this new canon. And so it appears that Momin's ghost is largely tethered to this mask.
Right.
And I'm not sure we ever fully got the answer why, even though I think there's a couple of hints in there and a couple different interpretations.
I don't think it was made explicit either. Um, but I like sort of to the end of stuff that we haven't gotten a lot of. I like that in like the whole story about the fortress kind of revolves around the idea that something about the architecture of the building, like the way it's like literally constructed, um, plays into some kind of like notion of like Sith necromancy, like this idea that it's some type of magic going on, some kind of dark side thing that is is differently connected to like like the literal structure of the building, such that it's not like an aesthetic thing, where I'm designing this differently because I want it to look or feel differently, but like
Right.
literally the way that the building is channeling, the energy of the dark side in this place changes depending on um how like the building is structured. I like that it has that kind of dark side magic element, a little bit different too. Yeah, some dark.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um, and so really this comic added a lot of different implications because you have what's going on with Mammon, you have whatever this strange world is inside of Vader's castle. Um, I kind of it almost felt like a more darkish version of World Between Worlds to me.
Yeah.
Um, and I really liked that because of the irony, in Rebels, where we see the world between worlds. It Palpatine is trying to manipulate Ezra to get him inside of that space, and here Vader achieves what Palpatine wants so badly to some extent, um, but ultimately destroys it so he doesn't get it. I kind of wondered to the extent that this could be like a portal. I also wondered if Mammon didn't really die when, like, in ancient times, or rather that he found a way through whatever his machine was doing into the space that Vader went into and
Right.
was like trapped there, but could communicate through the mask. And then when Vader opened the portal, Mommen's body was able to come back. Like that was I don't know that I interpret it that I could also just be as simple as it was a ghost, but I almost kind of had to wonder if it wasn't something like that.
I mean, it could definitely be. I think it at least opens the door, to risk the pun, of that being the case. Just because, like, I think we are meant to believe that it is Momin's, like, his literal body that is coming
Yeah.
back in a moment. And,
Yes.
like, if that's the case, then that kind of begs the question of is something else going on there, and whatever that something is, I think it may be less than. But I think it's
Right.
it's more to it than and I thought too for a long time. The way I thought about it was, since we're talking about Kotor and those Sith ghosts, but
Mhm.
I keep thinking about Kotor 2, where, you have the little trial in the Sith cave, and Exile looks back at like the war with Revan and like sees how choices could have gone down differently. And I almost saw this as like a Force vision kind of thing, but I have to
Mhm.
believe that like it's more than just Force vision at this point. Like
Yeah.
Vader goes to a place
Yeah.
through that door, and Momin's body comes back from a place.
From a place. Yeah. And what's going on there is happening. I mean, I don't know that we really see too much interaction between Mammon and like the people building the castle, but it didn't seem like people thought Vader had an imaginary friend either. So like something is tangibly there and possessing those bodies.
Right.
So I think that it has to be more than just a vision. People are talking about comparing this to like a Horcrux in the chat. Yeah, I've thought for a while that it could have been Palpatine hiding in Vader's mask. If he's not hiding in Vader's mask, he could be hiding in the Death Star wreckage we see, and therefore is confined to an area. But that's something larger. But like to the idea too of it being either the world between worlds or like a dark shadow of the world between worlds. Um, in those episodes of Rebels, you know, Ezra pulls Ahsoka through the portal, and then she travels back, which is how she survives um, the fight there with Vader
Right.
when the temple blows up. So there is this idea that you can pull a body into this space and then release it in a different time, and then it's implied, or well, no, it is said. We never really know if it's true or not, but Ezra is presented with the choice of saving Kanan or not, and then he decides, no, I'm not going to mess with. Of all the people in all of Star Wars, I would not have expected Ezra to be the one to learn from centuries of storytelling, but he decides to be not the person that's going to mess with fate, even though he already did with Ahsoka. But that was more instinctual. Hello, John. Welcome. How would he be hiding if he's not physically alive or a ghost? I mean, that's a great discussion for a Tross stream, I think. But I do think that it's very possible that it's going to be tied to something in the movie, some kind of Palpatine iconography.
Well, and there's just something so evocative about a Sith mask, that really like appeals to me as a Star Wars fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't help but think that Charles Soule, in writing this, knows that to have these types of questions about these
Well,
connections, at least until things get answered. I don't know if he's seen stuff, but
I
I feel
mean,
like
my
it's
thing with
begging the question.
yeah, I mean, like with Charles Soule, he's also the one writing the Kylo Ren comic,
Yep, exactly. Yep.
meaning, and he's also part of Project Luminous. So I don't know what, but he's a guy who's read things. Like he has to be a guy who's read things. Like whether or not he knew those things when he was writing the Vader comic or not, I don't know. But I don't. The other reason why I really wanted to make sure I read this is the Kylo Ren comic is going to be one of the few times I break my rule and read a comic before it's in trade.
Yeah.
And there's no way that series does not have connections to this one. I mean, especially when you look at so many of Vader's lines of dialogue in this trade are like Kylo lines of dialogue. So there's going to be connections. There's just no way it doesn't.
So why don't we talk a little bit about what Vader sees once he goes through the door?
Yes.
Because I think a lot of that was really powerful to me. Including like the one part of one image that the internet focused on.
That everyone freaked out. Even that, there's a lot there. I just want to say, one of these days I will make you play Bioshock Infinite, because all I want to do is make references to the doors and what's behind all the doors, and it will mean nothing to you. One day.
I mean, you can go ahead, and I can just rewatch this at some point, I guess. I mean, I've not seen Avatar either, but I caught on to the secret tunnel through the mountain.
Tunnel through the mountains. I mean, the first image. So all of the stuff in the vision, the place, the traveling, the what have you, is all in issue 25. And like the very first panel, if you can see it all right, I can't tell how it's framed on my camera, but I mean that's just so much. I love this idea that he goes through this portal, and Vader's like mechanical body is left behind, and it's just that spirit man that we've been seeing throughout the whole arc,
Right.
of his charred body, and then his the whiteness where his limbs are not.
Well, and that's something I really liked about the first three that we talked about before, is that way of representing like his mental space where he goes when he meditates, and to see that like literally made manifest when he goes through this doorway. I really like that artistically too.
Yeah. I think there's something interesting too here, just the way Vader keeps getting represented. Because I told you the first time I read it, I got confused, and I thought that it was supposed to be like part light, part dark within him. But then I realized it was his mechanical limbs. But then to have the absence and the Force be represented as white, I just think is a very interesting choice. Like,
Right.
if this was a figure who was dark and light conflicted, would that have been blue? Like, how does this work? Like, why is absence white? Um, so I think that's very interesting. And yeah, and then we get into we don't really have the panels ready for everyone to go, but this page here is the infamous one that everyone lost their minds over. And when everyone was like, "Did Palpatine create Anakin?" OMG, I just wanted to go, "What is this, 2005 again?"
Yeah.
Like, literally, everyone had this conversation after Revenge of the Sith. Where have you been? Oh, catch you later, Dark Ride. Thank you for coming by. It was so good to see you. I hope you have a good rest of your day. But so you have the image of, it's kind of being blocked by my Yoda Bauer name. That's okay. It's Shmi, who's preggers. She's got her bun in the oven. What I always think is interesting is people talk about like Palpatine having his hands around Shmi, but really there's like the one part where we see the word unnatural, which is of course unnatural, which is from Revenge. But then the actual close up of Shmi with the arms around her belly is really just her. Like, Palpatine is not in that panel at all. So, but a lot of people took that to be Palpatine creating Anakin. Of course, in Legends, it was Plagueis, who was at least highly involved in the process. But that's not canon anymore. But there's a lot going on throughout here of Anakin being the chosen one, but being so caught up in the dark side, and what does it mean that he had all of this? And
Right. Well, and I loved the way that it used lines of dialogue as a way of kind of telling and retelling Anakin and Vader's story.
mm-hmm.
And I think that's what basically all of the negative reviews I saw was they saw the now this is pod racing thing, and that back to that kind of rote criticism of Phantom Menace.
Right.
But I think for me it really tied all of that history together for me.
Mm-hmm.
That Vader's trying to go into this place. If it's not the world between worlds, it's some type of place beyond death. Because he's trying to save Padme. He's trying to still. He was sold a bill of goods that told him that was a thing that the dark side would allow.
Can do.
And now Palpatine and Momin both have told him that. And so he's trying to like figure out how to navigate that. But in the meantime, like he gets like it's almost like he's experiencing, I guess, in kind of like a It's a Wonderful Life kind of way. Like he's experiencing like his own life and like the way his life might have been and how his life is. And it's, even if it's only symbolic, I think it's powerfully symbolic. And I think that the way I read that, which I'd seen that panel too out of context because that's what Twitter does. But I kind of read that as, Anakin seeing the way that events of his life had been manipulated, and and using that as kind of metaphor. I mean, because just like in other places, when he sees Anakin as a kid and it's got the Vader mask, like we don't interpret that literally. So like, why would we interpret this literally? Like I don't think it's meant to be this actual representation of those. But I think to the extent that this was a comic about, Vader still becoming Vader, still kind of figure out what it is to be Vader and not Anakin. I think it says a lot about that. Get to see that kind of moment. And it's why I like the meditation stuff before, because we get to see him figuring that out. Kind of a journey on.
Well, and that's a point that's easy to, or you were saying a point that's easy to gloss over, which is Vader was doing all of this. He wanted to build this fortress because he wanted to resurrect Padme.
Yep.
And she continues to be this massive dynamic in his life. Even if you go to the Kieran Gillen comics, Vader is at the end of his rope, and he comes back because he's having this vision with Padme.
Right.
But this is not, bringing her back to life is not this selfless act, truly. You know, it's not really an act of compassion. And through this whole time, he wants Padme back. He's not thinking about, uh, at the time, he thinks he has one child, but he's not thinking about the child that he lost. He's thinking
Right.
about Padme. And I think that's always very telling when you watch Revenge of the Sith, that Anakin is afraid for Padme, never afraid for the child. That's my own personal headcanon why Anakin actually never knew he had twins. I choose to believe that he never even searched his child with the Force, because for some reason he never had interest, because he never expresses interest in the movie.
He didn't have that moment that Luke and Mara did in the last NJO book, where Mara's like, "Wait, there's something strange growing in my uterus, and
Mara
let's look into the Force."
life science classes.
Yeah, and because they have that moment too, where they're like trying to use the Force to learn
Yeah.
the gender of the baby, and I'm like, "Well,
And Leia does that in the Aftermath trilogy.
Yeah, you're right.
Convincing her child and consents Force within her child. So it's an established thing, in both canons. But Anakin, anyway, it's telling that in Revenge of the Sith he never cares where his kid is, and I think it's telling in this comic, um, that he doesn't think about where his kid is, and but yeah, I think this is interesting. All of this is about resurrecting Padme, and he gets to the point where he finds her, and even in this Force place, can't save her.
Right.
And she's largely saved. Because the panels imply that she doesn't recognize him.
Right.
And so that because he's not Anakin, she either doesn't want to come back or can't come back. It's possible that she can't come back anyway. He's looking at a vision of her, not a portal to her. So it's not like Ezra having the opportunity to save Kanan from a point where he was alive. He's seeing a vision of Padme.
Right.
And not being able to pull her back. And I feel like what you were saying, how he was seeing all of the parts of his life and how they've been corrupted and changed, that is again where I feel like, I don't know that this is the world between worlds, but like this almost dark, corrupted, perverted version of it.
Right.
Where he's seeing all of these things, and everything in here is a corruption of some kind. He's seeing these parts that really did happen,
Right.
and he's seeing lines that did exist, but there's also, the one "I'm your father" line that I think is also what led into Palpatine, but the panel's really Palpatine and Obi-Wan. And so it's this idea of he had these two different father figures, and I don't know, there's a lot you can kind of glean from it, to say the least.
I think so too, and I think, again, all of this is still in the context of Vader trying to make sense of who he is.
Mm-hmm.
Like the comic overall, if you think about all 4 volumes, like the comic
Mm-hmm.
begins with that scene in Revenge of the Sith where he wakes up
Yep.
after Mustafar, and like that's his first experience after having been nearly burned to death.
Mm-hmm.
And like he, across this comic, is coming to terms with what that means. And we're still so far displaced from A New Hope, that by the time we see Vader again, even like in the Star Wars comic, or
Mm-hmm.
the Kieran Gillen Vader comic, he's figured it out by then, because like
Yeah.
decades have passed. But this is, what is it, less than a year or around a year? Like, what was we talked about the timeline last week.
Yeah, at some point Palpatine says a line that he's had the Empire for a year.
So like over the course of that first year of this,
Yeah.
like he's still figuring out what this means in terms of his identity, and
Yeah.
like in a tragic kind of way, at least until he knows that Luke is alive. This
Mhm.
is, I think, for him, one of the last times that he tries. Like this
Yeah.
is his last attempt to try to fulfill what he thought the promise of the dark side was,
Mhm.
and like he fails. So this is
Right.
this is what prompts him, not from like what Yoda told him, where you train yourself to let go, but like
Right.
this is the moment where he lets go, because he realizes that because of the choices he's made, whether it was the choice he made on Mustafar or the choice he's making in this place, that
Right.
those things are no longer possible. that he has changed such that those things are no longer possible.
Yeah, I really like that, and there's two lines there that you have going, and they're both, or one of them is quoted in here, but they kind of keep throwing it back to Kylo Ren dialogue. Kylo has two lines that he has the "Let the past die, kill it if you have to," but then he also has that part where he yells at Rey, and he's like, "No, you're still holding on. Let go."
Right.
Um, and then I've often compared the "Let go" line to Yoda's "Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose." And
Right.
I think that those are the two ways. Like, it's kind of like the right way and the wrong way of achieving the same thing. Like, not letting your past define you, but there's a difference between letting the past go and letting the past die.
Right.
And a light sider, a true Jedi, can let the past go, and a Sith wants to kill what's in the past. Although the irony is, and Palpatine knows this, it's Vader's past that drives his power. That
Right.
Vader has to pull on these memories of pain. Yeah, and to let go of hope, as Dale said, and Sin says Anakin was so caught up on Padme, that was all that matters. Yeah, and I think, at least through this comic, he's more concerned about Padme than he is about ruling as the Sith Lord.
Right.
I think that changes, but I think that's where he's at now.
Well, but like you were saying too, like I feel like he's focused on Padme,
Hmm.
but it's not selfless. He's not
Right,
focusing on Padme for Padme's sake. Focusing on
right.
Padme because of what she represents for his life. And it's
Hmm.
kind of like a reverse fridging in a way. Like
Right,
I'm trying to resurrect this person as personal motivation.
right.
And
It's a defrosting.
yeah. But it's also an attempt at absolution because Palpatine,
Yeah,
and I guess he takes Palpatine on his word because
yeah.
Palpatine says, "In your anger, you killed her." Like so, like this is an attempt to right what he sees as a wrong that he committed.
Hmm.
Also, and so like it's not. I don't think it at least is purely for her sake. It's him trying to find his own peace again and his own absolution, and
Right,
that's so characteristic of the dark side. This idea that I can't let go because of my own reasons, not that I will let go for other people, and that's
right.
such a different type of motivation there. I think it speaks to the nature of the difference between the dark side and the light side. I think it speaks to the person that Anakin has become.
No, I think a lot of that ties into. It's easy to forget what the first issue was in this trade. And the first issue is the issue with Eth Koth
Right,
and the
from the baby.
baby, and the two Inquisitors that are in love. And then Vader tracks them down in the second issue, and Palpatine gets mad at him because he like tore up half a Coruscant, and Palpatine's like, I can't do this. Also, welcome Dragonflame. It's good to see you. It's been a long time, buddy. Um, but Palpatine's like, you, what are you gonna do? And he wants, Palpatine's like, you gotta get your act together. I need you to go to Alderaan and like shake down Bail Organa, which again is ironic because if Vader had gone, what could have happened if he met Leia at a younger age? But we'll see. Uh, but then Vader's like, no, I need my fortress. And Palpatine's like, no, this makes sense. You need your place. You need your world. You need a place to rule and find yourself. And it really felt like Vader, was tracking down these two Inquisitors that had a thing because he was mad because he just found a Jedi having a family and a child, which was something he was denied.
Right,
So I think for him to see a Jedi Master getting what he wanted, and getting the thing that drove him to the dark side to begin with, put him on edge. And then he goes after these Inquisitors. Everything in his motivation right now is about what I was denied, what I didn't get, what I lost, what was taken from me.
right,
And he wants to get some part of that back. Um, and it's so ironic because you have that I need to kill the past, move on from the past, but it's also that, but I also need it back. It's almost like he wants to destroy the past by making the past the present, right? Like if he can
right,
bring Padme back, she's not the past
right.
anymore.
Well, and I think I think it speaks to Anakin's motivations, but again, I think it speaks to the nature of the dark side,
Yep.
because that's basically exactly what Momin wants out of this too. Like,
Yep.
Momin is presented as this person that wants to use the dark side for purely creative purposes and to like
Mhm.
create this instance of dark side strength. But we
Yeah.
learn that he's doing it for his own purposes too, and he
Mhm.
betrays Vader in doing it, because that's the
Yep.
nature of the dark side, is that it allows you to indulge yourself at the expense of other people.
Mhm.
And I really liked the idea, as I was reading this, that because I'm a big proponent that the dark side is not inherently evil, and that
Mhm.
there is this kind of unifying force way of thinking about things,
Mhm.
that I liked seeing, dark side used for creative purposes. But I think it,
Mhm.
it speaks to at least the perspective that we get from Yoda and Empire, that that it was inherently corrupted because it was the dark side. Like
Right.
it would never be this generative thing because it was the dark side. And I think that's a power, even if it's not what I might have preferred. I think it was a powerful statement about the
Right.
nature of the force, which is another reason why I love this.
Well, and to your point there, I keep meaning to either do like a follow up because I did that Balance of the Force series like a
Mm.
year ago, and I keep meaning to either do a follow up or not, but I kind of want to wait for what we learn in Rise of Skywalker here. But yeah, like the way I kind of headcanon the dark and the light side of the Force is that the dark side is not intrinsically evil, but it does corrupt. Like
Yeah,
it's something like mortals, if they wield it, will be corrupted by it. That's why the
right.
Jedi have to follow the living force. Like living beings have to use the living force, and if you try to not use the living force, like things get screwed up. So like the dark side might not be evil, but you using it can corrupt you because
Right.
as a mortal being, you don't have the strength to wield it. And I think you can see that, maybe not proof of my head canon, but Momin, you get the flashbacks to him when he's younger and he's like carving up animals and how
Right.
his master finds him. And his ultimate goal, if I remember it correctly, was to attack a planet and like when everyone is in fear, like cover like freeze them in time. It's basically like Taco Tuesday from the Lego movie.
Yeah.
It was pretty much his goal. Like he's Lord Business and he just wants to freeze everybody in place. Um, and so Momin's already messing with space and time, which is part of why I think he may have been hidden in evil Narnia until Vader came.
Learn that everything is less than awesome.
Hmm.
Oh, um, but I don't know. I really liked it, and I think Momin was such an interesting character for
Yep.
us to be able to experience this. Um, I also, um, I really love, and we talked about this a little bit in the last stream, and we've talked about this off camera too. I don't know what we talked about when, but I really love that at the end of this, Vader closes the door.
Yep.
And I think that's such a powerful thing too. One, because he's closing the door, like literally on this attempt to recover Padme,
Yep.
but he's also closing the door, at least in the sense that Palpatine is not going to get access to this because he
Yeah.
doesn't even tell him about it. But maybe you could also read, and maybe this is reading too much into it, that he's closing the door because maybe nobody is supposed to have this, and like
Hmm.
he found something, and maybe he found it because he's the chosen one, and he found it and realized it's better left closed.
Hmm.
Um, but he, at the same time, he keeps the fortress. He doesn't
Right.
destroy the fortress, so he
He
keeps
wants
that
that
there too.
force powers. Hello, Yagi. Welcome. I think it was last stream because I was talking about how he like I consider Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one. I don't think what people like to go back to the Yoda line, a prophecy misread could have been.
Right.
I choose to believe that it's not that the prophecy was misread about it being Anakin, but that what balance meant was misread. That
Oh yeah, I
the
think so too.
Jedi thinking the Jedi thinking the chosen one has come in to save the Jedi is the misread part of that prophecy.
Right.
And so what I liked about Vader ultimately closing the door to this world was that um, it's a type of thing a chosen one could do. The chosen one could find this space and enter it, um, but then be destined to stop Palpatine from getting into this space.
Right.
And that he could have even either done that as like a light sider and defeated Palpatine or whatever, or he can do it as a dark sider and destroy it. So that as the chosen one, he has a destiny before him, but how he fulfills it. And saying that out loud now kind of triggers another thing because I keep calling it like a shadow version of the world between worlds. You know, Vader, or actually, let me start this way. There's a Resistance Recon episode for World Between Worlds. And in that Resistance Recon, or not Resistance, I wish we had Resistance Recon, in Rebels Recon, Dave Filoni talks about how we saw the World Between Worlds in season 1 of Rebels when Ezra talked to Yoda,
Right.
and that it looked different because Ezra did not have the knowledge and the experience to be able to perceive the whole space. You know, maybe Yoda saw it differently than Ezra did. But if that's true, you know, maybe Anakin, by the basis of being the chosen one, maybe because he had been to Mortis and in some way has experienced a force space like this before, was able to enter the space even that's really supposedly more of a light side thing, right? Like
Right.
Ezra, who is really just a learner to a Jedi who never graduated beyond Padawan, and not to sell either of those characters short, but it's not like they've had decades and decades and decades of study in the archives or anything.
Right.
You know, Ezra is able to go into the world between worlds, but Palpatine, who has so much power, can't. And if you listen to the lines of dialogue in the world between worlds, you get lines of Anakin, and you get Kylo Ren lines, but otherwise there's no Darksiders heard in the world between worlds. But you know, Anakin dies a light sider, and Ben Solo's probably getting redeemed. So you know, I think that's fine. But if the world between worlds is this like light side space, and Anakin can enter it by the nature of being the chosen one, maybe entering it as a Darksider, he inherently corrupted what he saw.
Right.
So like maybe that's why it's kind of like the world between worlds, but it's this corrupted version because he's entering as a corrupted person. I don't know. The theory came to me 30 seconds ago.
Well, and
But
it could be too that because he's entering it so focused on himself that
yeah,
all he sees is the corrupted version of himself.
that's true.
And he doesn't see these other moments or the way it manifests itself. I mean, because that's like what we see in Rebels is that there are more disconnections to the fact that the world between worlds even exists at all.
Yep.
And Ahsoka tells us that.
Yep.
I mean, to the extent that she remembers Mortis.
Mhm.
But I think there's something to that too, and it makes me also wonder, you know, the vision scene that Rey gets, in the Force Awakens when she finds the saber. Like we
Yeah.
have, you know, a super adequate explanation for what that was, but you know, but it whether or not it's the same thing, it evokes the same kind of feelings for me.
Right.
You know, because Rey, like, there's all these voices there when Rey's having that vision there too, and
Mhm.
Anakin and Vader get all these voices now, and you know,
Mhm.
Ezra got these voices in the world between worlds. Like, I feel like even if it's not the same thing, like there are too many corollaries not to see connections. And it doesn't have to be the exact same thing for it to be meaningful that they
Oh
are
yeah.
similar.
Well, and even to go, obviously we don't have Rise of Skywalker yet, but to even just go through the one trailer we have, you have the line of Luke's voiceover saying "1,000 generations live in you now."
So,
There's just this idea of passed down knowledge, passed down voices, from person to person within the Force.
and I love that Vader makes the decision not to give Palpatine access.
Yeah,
I also
and
love the idea that when Krennic comes to visit him in Rogue One, that like literally might be the same room because you know Krennic's
critics
like
like,
knocking on the door, and Vader's like, "What are you doing here?"
well, I like the idea that Krennic's there because it goes to Vader's disdain for the Death Star in A New Hope, where you know Krennic's there, like I'm building this super powerful weapon that can destroy like a planet, and Vader is standing on the spot where he like went through a portal of space and time,
Right.
and like and saw ghosts of the past. And he's like, "Yeah, sure, your big lightsaber gun is really powerful." Calamari, welcome.
Nothing compared to the power of the Force.
Nothing. Yeah, it's just a whole lot of not even close, Krennic.
But I
Um,
also think too, and I think I mentioned this in the last stream too, that
mhm.
I doubt whether or not Palpatine ever even goes to Mustafar.
Yeah,
And so like the fact that like one, Vader doesn't tell him about it, but two, it's like Palpatine doesn't even assume that Vader would be capable of stuff like that. And so
yeah.
like he would never even bother. Um I like that too.
I think it's there's a lot going on with their relationship. Because I feel like at some level, I mean, Palpatine gave him that mask for some reason, and and then to not necessarily follow up on it, or maybe Palpatine did, and we just haven't seen that story yet. But I don't know. I think that's fascinating, and to give him the resources and like the fact that they're building this fortress. I mean, yeah, they have like space construction powers, but like it took time. Vader was there for some amount of time, and for Palpatine to just be like, "Eh, he's fine. He'll figure it out. He's just building like lava castles. It's cool."
At least he's not, messing up the traffic patterns on Coruscant.
Of course not. That's way more important that he goes. Um,
I was also thinking as I read this too, and this is a completely different and more minute thought. But if you're those Imperial engineers and construction workers, are you
yeah.
are you grateful for like the lengthy employment opportunity that you're getting by working on this same job for so long, or are you thinking we just built this tower 10 times? You know, what was wrong with it the first time?
I think I would just be happy as long as I did not become the new Lord Momin.
Yeah,
I think that's about it.
I
Just
think
conveniently don't be anywhere near Vader at the time of testing the castle.
right. But I also think too, and I don't know what you'll think, but I think it would have been easy for this comic to give us like a Vader as like Star Killer moment where he's like forming the lava with the Force,
Yeah.
and I'm kind of glad that they didn't do that.
Yeah.
But um, I really loved this comic. Um,
I was
I
gonna
think
say
it
real
tells
quick,
us so much.
especially just because to go to a point you made just a minute ago, and especially because we haven't had a Kevin Scott reference yet. The other time we hear voices is in the Dark Side Moss in
Oh,
Dooku
yep.
Jedi Lost.
Speaking
They
of which,
were
we've made a couple of, we talked about uh the Vader's Castle uh Kevin Scott reference. Before we wind things up, we'll make that explicit.
Yep,
Gotta
this
be
is our Kevin Scott reference.
weekly as frick.
Weekly as frick.
Just like our streamcast, where they definitely start on time, same day,
Every time.
every time.
Without fail.
But any other thoughts are on this?
I mean I feel like this is gonna be one of those things where I'll go back and read this after the Rise of Skywalker, or like after I've read the Kylo Ren comic or something, and then I'll have like we'll have to do like a whole other stream. um, but no, I think we got through some of the big theories I had. Uh,
I think, in addition to saying I really liked this, I think this is going to be one of those things, that 4 or 5 years from now, you're still talking about as
yeah,
just like the Mortis episodes, just like the world, just like some of the other books and comics that sticks told us or shown us something important. That
I agree. And I'll catch you later, Stuart. Thank you for dropping by. Ray King gets force tingle. I think he gets like a force tingle, but it's like a oh no. I don't think it's like a great. I think it's like a
as long as it's not
like
Yoda
a
in Revenge of the Sith, just clutching his heart and dropping his cane. As
as
long as
long as
that's
it's
not what
not
it is.
As long as it's not the cease and desist order, like that's all I'm hoping for.
Thousands of voices cried out all at once.
Oh, but thank you guys so much for being here. We're going to, in theory, do something tomorrow for Attack of the Clones for our journey to the rise of Skywalker.
Yep, started that last week with episode 1. So if you didn't catch that, back and that and see.
Yep.
And this is in some form or fashion something we're hoping to continue. The rise of Skywalker. But I think that is going to do it for us today. Follow us on all the socials. You can see all the links there. And see you tomorrow.
Catch you later.
Fingers crossed.
Bye.